In this next part, I'm going to, again, use the Hackme, the Rocket, but I'm going to start talking about filtering. The idea mathematically behind sound is that you can break up any sound that you hear in, right now, what we're going to call the time domain, into individual sine and cosine waves of different frequencies in the frequency domain. With an analog filter, we don't really have to worry about that. But with a digital filter, the entire point is to have individual frequency values in order to create things like sine waves, square waves, triangle waves, sawtooth, and so on. Now, I did kind of make a mistake there. We're not really going to recreate a sine wave per se. What we could do is add several sine waves together in order to create beat frequencies. And then we could tune them in the frequency domain if we really wanted to. Why do we care? Well, in the frequency domain, if you have individual frequencies for sine waves and cosines, you're going to see that they're at different amplitudes. And when you add those all up, you're going to get some kind of result in the time domain that may be recognizable, especially if you designed it that way. If we take a simple sine wave, doesn't matter what the starting frequency is, and we add to it the second harmonic, or the third harmonic, the fourth harmonic, at different amplitudes, and we keep doing that to infinity, we could get a square wave. Now, if we take a different combination of sine and cosine waves and we change the amplitude a little bit, the result could be instead a triangle wave or a sawtooth. Again, why does this matter? Because when we turn around and apply the filter to the waveform and we remove the higher frequencies, we're going to go back to our starting sine wave. And this is where all the real fun comes in with a synthesizer, basically the frequency sweep. In the first part, I talked about how the Hackme has three different kinds of waveforms: sine, square wave, and triangle. Now, if I start changing the frequency filter, there really isn't much variation between no filter and a lot of filter. What I'm doing is I'm changing the cutoff frequency for the filter based on the waveform coming in, and then I'm just simply spitting it out to the speakers. But if I change the waveform to a square wave, I'm going down to my basic sine wave, my fundamental sine wave. And this is really why I like playing with synthesizers. It's that frequency sweep. We could add a triangle wave. We could mix the two. Let's go with the square wave on oscillator 1. Triangle wave on oscillator 2. About a 15% mix. Find something really obnoxious for the detune. And there's a lot to work with there with the filter. So when we change the cutoff frequency, if we do a sweep, you can hear the difference. If I tried doing that with a sine wave, there really wouldn't be much change. Next, we have resonance or Q. Normally, in analog circuitry, when you create a square wave, you don't want weird looking corners on the square wave. You want something nice and sharp. And that's kind of hard to do with analog circuits. And designers would create different, basically forms of feedback or control that would create a sharper corner. And the result was, when we take that circuitry and put it in a synthesizer, we want to break that sharp corner. We don't want a really nice on-off for the square wave. What we want is undershoot or overshoot. Basically, we're going too far up on the square wave. We're kind of overcharging the square wave. And while that may be bad normally in other circuits, with a synthesizer, it's cool. And when you play with those together, changing frequency and Q, changing the cutoff frequency, changing resonance, you get a lot of different effects there. Historically, the filter section has been called the voltage controlled filter, the VCF. And with the VCF, you're changing frequency electronically, which gives you some more options when you start using the low frequency oscillators, which I'll get into later. Now, with the filter,
There are actually 3 bands. You see this on many different synthesizers, not all of them. You have the low band, mid band, band pass, and high band. Mid band, high band. They work the same, it's just that there's different sets of frequencies that are being passed on to the speaker. Generally, I consider low band to be the most useful of the 3. Now, the fun part about the filters is that the note that you have is going to be affected differently based on the frequency of that note. So if it's a low note, the low pass filter is going to sound differently than it does for a higher note. And obviously that's going to be because the low band filter is removing higher frequencies. Higher frequency note to start with. The different the effect. Now, with the Rocket, there is also an envelope for the filter. And that's this part. Now, the envelope can either basically cause the filter to sweep up or sweep down from its current setting. So if I set the filter and then I change the amount of the envelope, the filter is being swept based on the attack, decay, sustain, and release wave shape that is also being applied to the volume out. And it would be the same as if I just changed the filter manually. And that's the filter section.